Welcome to Exploring Digital with Purr, a podcast for entrepreneurs and CEOs who want their businesses to benefit from a digital-first approach. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Exploring Digital with Purr. I'm joined today by Tom Young, who's the CEO at TapTrip. Hi, Tom.
Hi, how are you?
Really well, you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Yeah, do you want to kick us off by telling everyone a bit about TapTrip and how you came to be the CEO there?
Yeah, sure. So TapTrip is a business travel platform that partners with travel management companies, banks, and various other industries to offer our services to them and to their clients. Started the business about 2.5 years ago, and it's been a crazy ride since. So originally just 3 co-founders working out of first on my kitchen table, then in my friend's spare warehouse in his roof, which was interesting. Had no central heating. It was very cold and it was middle of winter. And then now there's 21 of us spread across Manchester, London, and we got a couple of people in Romania as well. Lots more to come.
And so do you come from a traditional travel background, or had you been working in sort of business travel in any sense before that?
A mixture, really. So I spent a little while at Booking.com as a product manager, predominantly working on ground transportation. So on taxis, on rail, a little run around buses as well. And then prior to that, I had a startup. So this is my third startup. I've had one failure. My previous startup I exited, and then this is the third one now. So I've had kind of like a roller coaster of experiences in this world.
I think it's more typical than most people would imagine for a startup founder to have had that sort of background.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Brilliant. And let's try a little bit of a word association game. It's something we're trying out on this series. So if you can, in as quick a response as possible, tell me what the following means to you. TapTrip.
Different, making things that are interesting and changing the status quo of an industry that is very archaic in its ways.
Okay, different we'll go with then. Tom Young.
Weird.
That helps. The TapTrip team.
Oddballs.
And your work.
Eccentric.
I'm guessing you're from the Northwest. City or countryside?
I'm from Manchester originally, but I live in a little village called Disley, which is on the border of the Peak District.
Lovely. So you prefer the countryside now?
Oh yes, definitely. I lived in New York for a while, and that made me realise I need to go and live by a hill.
Yeah, that's enough to convince anyone. And do you prefer to spend your time with a book or a film?
Definitely a film. I do listen to books, but I don't read. I'm 100% an Audible person.
And as someone who's been in the startup space for a good long while, and you've had some success and some failure, and then picked an industry that's absolutely fine right now, if you were going to give one piece of advice to one young kind of ambitious startup founder, what do you think it would be?
Don't be a dick would be my biggest piece of advice. I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I've ever had is take your ego out of everything. Be nice, be helpful, have a give first mentality. I think not being a dick will get you far in life, whether that's being a startup founder or not. But if people like you and people will end up wanting to back you and your ideas. So yeah, just don't be a dick.
Was that something that was advice given to you, or just something you came to discover yourself?
There's advice given to me. So on my previous startup, we went through an accelerator in Newcastle called Ignite, and it was run by a guy called Paul Smith at the time. And his number one mantra to everybody was "Don't be a dick," and I've always lived by that ever since.
Brilliant. So, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that experience going through that accelerator, and how that's, I guess, contributed to this sort of serial entrepreneur background of yours?
Yeah, so I think most people would describe me as a serial accelerator person. I've done 4 accelerators, I think now, which is just
Wow.
baffling. And I think I age it every time for another 10 years. So yeah, did Ignite in Newcastle, which was a very early stage accelerator, very intense, and it was very much focused on how do you get angel investment, so like 100K after it. I think the main learning was there that I got from that was you don't necessarily need to build anything with tech to actually launch an MVP for your first ever
No?
product. It could be done manual. There's a really good book I recommend to read called The Mom Test, which is by a guy called Rob Fitzpatrick. And that's about how to have a conversation with customers to validate your ideas without actually telling them that you're working on anything or what the idea is. Because there's this misconception that if you, for example, if I've got a business idea and I go and tell my mum about the idea, she's probably going to lie to me and say it's a great idea because she doesn't want to hurt my feelings. And us Europeans or British and so on, we're very conservative and we don't want to hurt people's feelings. Other than me, I like doing it. But anyway, the mom test allows you to get through that. And I think having that mom test kind of thing at the start is a good way to validate an idea or not without actually investing any time in developing something. That was my number one takeaway from Ignite. And then since then, I've been through Techstars twice, and I've also done a lot with Founders Factory as well. Very different experiences. Techstars, just huge network, very American in their way, and I prefer that way. The American way is very interesting in terms of crazy hours, very eccentric and very different. Hence why I explain I kind of like explain our team in that way. And then the Founders Factory is run by all the lastminute.com people. So that's good for us because that's where TapTrip came from and had that travel experience with, and they had a corporate investor through that, which was EasyJet. So it was very like strategic rather than the accelerator itself.
So you mentioned Ignite was very focused on funding, with the others less focused on the sort of the funding side and more on product development and team development.
They were much more. So I'd say Ignite is early stage validation and getting a little bit of cash after it to try and validate the idea more. Techstars is more around, okay, you've already got an idea. Maybe it's already been validated. You've already got some customers. Now, how do we get you from this level to go and raise a couple of million? And then Founders Factory is more about how we link you with corporates to get more revenues and raise money. I'd say Ignite's for much earlier stage businesses, and then Techstars and Founders Factory are much more when you're more established.
Interesting. Okay, so what I'd be fascinated to know is you've got this, long lineage of going through these accelerators. Do you stay in touch with a lot of the founders, and what proportion of the ones that you've been in touch with for the longest are still on the same idea, and how many have pivoted? Would you say?
Yeah. So from Techstars, I pretty much keep in contact with 90% of them. So one of the things we used to do was have an all hands as every week, all the teams together to see how we've been doing for the week, the traction, any wins, any losses, and just try and come together as these 10 different companies, for example. And we still do that on a monthly basis, even though we finished the program about a year ago now. And we still have every month we'll have a all hands just to see how everyone's getting on. From my most recent program, everybody's still working, everybody's still alive. Quite a few companies have raised money. So we raised money after the program. Two or three of the other companies raised a substantial amount of capital after the program as well. But they're all still based in New York. Same goes for when I went for Techstars last time. The Ignite program, I think there's only a handful that are still around, but it has been about 5 years since.
Yeah, so you've been able to see the kind of the path that various startup founders have had and their success following initial rounds of funding. Has it been roughly what you'd expected, would you say, or were there perfectly strong teams and ideas that didn't have the luck of the big funding?
Yeah, I think there's a few that lost out that I would have thought would have won. I think there's a few problems there. Is number one is raising capital is very, very competitive, especially if you look at the number of venture capital firms in London and in the UK in general. even London, further afield. There's only so many of them. So if none of them really take a bet on you at a certain stage, then how else are you going to raise money other than going through an angel investor? And raising money through angel investors is just time consuming and tedious, and most of the time they're only putting small checks in. So if you're speaking to an angel investor, they're probably only looking at giving you £15,000 to £20,000, maybe £25,000, and you've got to invest loads and loads of energy just for that little check. And then that just takes a long time. Where a venture capital firm, you can spend a lot of time with them because you know that maybe a £500,000 check's at the end of it. But there's only so many of them out there. So if you're not a business that can raise money, maybe that's because you're not well networked, or it's hard for you to sell the vision to an investor. Where else do you go? It is a big challenge, and I think that's what I've consistently seen is people they're either good or bad at raising money. There's no really easy way of putting it.
But certainly that's a familiar story that, as a startup based in the UK, there's just a finite number of opportunities for that funding. So in your experience, you'd say that if you can get up and running with a little bit of money in the UK, next step is New York or West Coast and try and eke 100%. Out the big paycheck.
100%. Europeans in general and British, they're much more conservative, as I've mentioned, in their decision making. So they're very logical and methodology. To take this methodology, very methodical around how they will invest into a business. Where in the US, they're much more gut based. So if their gut says, "Oh my God, these guys are onto something. These guys or girls are onto something," they'll invest just off gut rather than going through this methodical approach to investing. So you can raise more money at a higher valuation
with fewer hurdles. Yeah,
time exactly.
Brilliant. Okay, well that's all good advice for people in similar situations potentially. So let's talk a little bit more about the product now, TapTrip. So tell us a little bit about how the platform has been built and how you came to the idea, and was this an idea that you had and needed to be evolved in any way, or have you pretty much ended up building what you envisaged to start with?
Yeah, so the product itself we've been building for the past couple of years, it's pretty much stayed the same in terms of what way we wanted to develop, but the target customer and how we take it to market has evolved. So originally we wanted to become a technology business that would sell it ourselves to businesses. So we would sell them the service, we would implement the technology, and then we would also provide the customer service and the after booking service. That's what we originally intended to do. But then as we evolved, we understood that that's really, really hard to do. And do we want to do that? Do I want a huge customer service team? No. Do I want to think about after sales? Not really. We're geeks, we're technology people. There are things we're not good at. And there's other people out there that are much better than us at doing it. So we looked at the market and we understood in our space, it's controlled by these businesses called travel management companies. So these travel management companies will handle all your business travel needs, all of the fulfillment, all the customer service, all the after booking, all of this in a manual way. So they've got huge customer service teams and they'll do it for you. The one thing these people lack is they don't really have much technology. So just to give you an example, there's one certain travel management company that we work with. They do over 1.6 billion a year in revenue, and about 80% of that is currently done over a customer service agent over the phone or email with little to no technology. That is consistent through every travel management company. They're very low adoption rates on technology, which baffles me to this day. Because
travel's an interesting one because so much of the underlying technology in travel is antiquated, right? These GDS systems, one, the technology itself is antiquated. The data quality within it is so low, and the efforts that people have to go to, you can't buy better data really at any affordable price point for anyone. The effort people have to go to try and improve the quality of their data is astonishing, and you realize that the barrier to entry for a tech product for most travel businesses is just obscene. And unless they're going to be an entirely tech-focused business, it just doesn't work in that sector.
Exactly,
But
and that's where now
as an industry, to upgrade everyone to make it all work better is just it's like trying to build NHS technology. It's almost impossible.
yeah, exactly, and that's why what we've decided is there needs to be a middle ground. They can't just be a technology player, and they can't just be a TMC. There needs to be a hybrid of the two. And the way you do that is we become the technology provider and we work with existing travel management companies to access their data, to automate their certain processes. And as we learn what each individual travel management company may or may do, that's how we build this enhancement in the space. So we've already worked with now a handful of travel management companies to do this. We're still early stages of being able to do this, but I think if we get this right, that 90%, 80% offline rate will go to more like 80, 90% online rate. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so to try and provide these tools through this hybrid model. Okay, fascinating. So you mentioned that this wasn't the original path that you were going to take. But what's great is that it's not requiring any different technology, right? The product that you built is valid. It's just a slightly different application.
Yeah, I think the only side that's different is we have to integrate with the travel management company systems now.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So what approach have you taken to doing that? Is it that you're providing a library and an API, or is it that are you having to do a lot of the legwork for them?
it's a mixture. So we have an API, but there's certain travel management companies where they just don't even have tech teams.
Yeah.
And because of COVID right now, they don't really have much money to spend. So we have to take this approach of we have to do some investment rather than give them the API because in frank terms, they can't integrate with it. And they're not good at tech. That's consistent is they're not good at tech. So instead we'll charge them to do the implementation.
Yeah. So in addition to being a tech company, you're now providing effectively a consultancy service to implement your technology too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Selling, well, which is almost like a dirty word for some startups, right? No one wants to be selling a service rather than a product, but it can lead to a much better revenue model.
Exactly. And for me, yes, we're a startup. Yes, we're a tech business, but you've got to do these things to get us profitable and make change in the industry. Yes, we have to do unsexy things right now, but it's going to be for the greater cause of what we're trying to achieve.
Are they effectively loss leaders? Some of the implementations, or do you think you're adequately
Oh, no,
compensated to do it?
we definitely we charge by the day rate, and our day rate at least doubles what it would cost us. So we make good
No,
money.
that's right. Good, because I think there's a black hole to go down of like, oh, we'll just do this a little bit more
Yeah.
to get this great client on board.
So I'm open about pricing, but so we purposely try and get them to avoid us doing the work by charging $850 a day implementation fee. So
Yeah.
I'm very open about that. Is we do that pricing just to purposely say, oh, they'll do the work. Otherwise, we'll just charge them $850 a day.
But it would cost so many companies far more than that to actually onboard and manage and have a tech team if they didn't have one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, completely. There's your dog there in the background. What's your dog's name?
He's called Pringles.
Oh, it's an excellent name.
He's an Australian Shepherd, and he's very, very boisterous and energetic. He's only 10 months old, so he's still learning.
So is this part of your Get Fit regime at the moment involving puppy walking?
Oh yes, plenty. So luckily, I live on the edge of the Peak District, so every weekend or every evening, I'm pretty much in the Peak District just going for a walk.
Brilliant. And is hill walking a new hobby for you?
Yeah, I've always wanted to do it. As I mentioned before, so one of the things I'm trying to do now is one, get into shape, and two, try and make myself be an advocate of well-being, especially in the business travel industry. So the problem in business travel is that well-being is always an afterthought. You're traveling a lot, you're always on the road, you're not thinking about what you're eating or exercising. That always becomes an afterthought, and it's
Yeah.
consistent. So
The realities aren't very kind of up in the air with George Clooney.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to change that in terms of us as a business, but also me personally as well.
Brilliant. And you mentioned as well that you've got a kind of a longer term fundraising activity going on with the walking too.
Yeah, so I'm currently raising. I'm trying to raise up to about £15,000 for the British Heart Foundation. Luckily, yesterday was World Heart Day, so how do we build that awareness and help for heart disease and how we can fight heart disease? It's something that's quite close to me. So a couple of years ago, I lost my dad to a heart attack, and my granddad before that as well. So I'm just trying to do this in his memory. So I'll be traversing the accursed Albanian Alps for 8 days, which is going to be grueling but fun. I'm doing it on my own, so I'm going to be kind of like a bit of a vision quest for me as well. And then I'm raising money as well for the British Heart Foundation in memory of my dad.
Well, best of luck with the fundraising and with your adventure in the Albanian Alps. Why the Albanian Alps specifically? Was that just somewhere you like the look of?
Yeah, I think I wanted something a bit different. Most people, when they do charity stuff, they're always going to do like the Free Peaks Challenge or
Yeah,
something like that.
bit
And I
too
thought,
easy.
you know what? Yeah, I just thought, let's go do something different and a bit crazy. Let's go to Albania.
Yeah.
And there's wolves in these mountains, so a bit more of a challenge.
Well, it's interesting. The whole kind of charity travel market at the moment has shifted a bit. Everyone who was previously booking Kilimanjaro climbs apparently has now shifted to doing a lot more. The Three Peaks is going to be so busy next year.
Oh yeah, great
Um,
opportunity.
so yeah, good opportunity to go to Albania. Going back to TapTrip then. So is this sort of focus on wellness, yes, it's something you're doing personally, but is it something you're trying to build into the company approach as a wider kind of like, is it part of the brand? Is it part of the messaging that you've got, this wellness
Yeah,
concept?
exactly. So just little things that we're trying to do. One is, how do we encourage travelers while they're on the go to experience new places, but do things that get them active and outside of the hotel, so they're not just being bored, and try and finding them restaurants that are a bit more different to the hotel food, so they can have choice. And then the final bit is just a little thing. So the one thing that, especially when you're traveling, um, colors such as cyan, for example, actually have a massive effect on how jet lagged you might be. So just a simple thing, we've got like night mode in our iOS app and Android app now, so you can get rid of the cyan when you use the TapTrip app, just because it's just just to help with any way we can to not make you as jet lagged. Just little things like that, very subtle, but it really does help towards this end goal.
Is that the same concept as like the night shift thing where you turn off certain color ranges and it makes you
Yeah,
less, well,
yeah,
you can sleep better? Yeah,
exactly.
interesting. But I guess it's all the same science as jet lag then. Okay, so TapTrip's got this new focus on wellness, and it's had to pivot a little bit in terms of its sales approach, but not in terms of technology approach. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the tech stack and how you built the product too?
Yeah, sure. So I will pretend to know a lot about tech when I'm not a techie. Our CTO does everything. I'm a product person. I did computer science at university. Didn't like coding, so I went into product management. I kind of see product managers as people who want to code but can't code, and they became product managers instead.
They're too busy to code.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so our tech stack itself is very much, we built it into a microservice architecture. All those fun buzzwords that are going around at the moment. Mainly because we're building this API layer, so all of our services can be then exposed in one open API. In terms of the tech, we most of it's built in Golang, which is Google's own language for their API for our APIs. Internally, we then have a GraphQL API that we use, and then external, we have a REST API. And then on the front end, it's all built in like Express JS and I can't remember what else, but basically JavaScript based. And then we have
Yeah,
a native iOS app and an Android app. We currently have a team of, how many now? We've got 15 software engineers now, predominantly working on the web side of things.
yep,
So we've got the Golang focused developers. We got they're more like try and become full stack developers, so we can do both front end and back end. And then we got a couple of people working on the mobile side of the business as well.
Out of interest in your kind of scaling as a startup, what was the beginning? Did you start with obviously you started with a concept that you and the mum test, nothing. Then later on, what did you build first? Was it some back end logic? Was it a front end prototype? At what point did you stick on the native app? And was it always a native app? Did you start with something hybrid?
Yeah, so to be honest, the first thing we launched was an iOS app, just on iOS, so you could book a flight on Skyscanner, and that was it. But it would integrate with your calendar. We got a couple of hundred of bookings in the B2C side of things, not corporate. So we launched with that. People started using it, and we found out that a lot of the segment was business travelers, which was what we aimed it at. We then closed the app. We built a web version of it so you could book flights. But we realized through our customer kind of development was that rail is massive, especially outside of London. Businesses do a lot of rail travel to London or to different satellite cities throughout the UK. So we launched an integration with rail as like a V1.1, and it kind of blew up from there. So we had one company based in Manchester, had an office in Bristol, one in Birmingham, and they were booking 400 train bookings a month just on a standard MVP. And that's where we thought, okay, there's actually something really interesting here. If one business is doing 400 bookings a month, yeah, we need to explore that further.
It's funny, isn't it, how people's perception can be very city-based, I guess, and people kind of forget that business travel equates to like all the way down to buses, and you kind of forget
Yeah.
that there's all of this. Right, trains are pretty good. The data's available. Buses is next to unavailable. Right, trying to license. I know the government are talking about licensing some of this data, but it's only just coming through, and there's still so much of the travel industry that we just don't have the information for.
It's very disconnected and very. So we tried to do stuff like this when I was at Booking.com, and if you actually look at the market, the space, you've got coaches, which is okay. I can go and get an API from like Flixbus or Hopper or someone like that, which is fine. National Express and all of that. But when you actually come down to airport shuttles, public,
it's very
transport,
distributed.
Yeah, and there's not really an API out there to do it. That's why if you look at City Mapper, you can't book a ticket, but you can see where buses are. There's only a certain level at the moment we can go on that.
It's interesting, and this is Britain, right? We're meant to be pretty high tech at some of this stuff, and yet, and if you're trying to book international business travel and try and get some of this data for other places, it's going to be even more of a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, to be honest, rail at the moment's quite a hot topic because rail itself, everybody in the business travel space is anticipating that rail's going to be the first piece where travel's going to start to resume. And as we're being much more eco-friendly, people are trying to get their employees to do more rail travel, even if it takes longer, just because of the environmental effect. And for us to be able to get that right, countries are going to have to actually work with each other on a rail basis, because every single country is different. Every rail system is mainly government run. So if the government hasn't done an API for it, then there's nothing we can do about the booking other than you have to go to their website. So it's very disjointed globally, basically.
What's Albania's system like?
I haven't checked, but one to look at. I assume non-existent, though, to be honest.
They may surprise you. You never know.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've talked a little bit about what the future looks like. So evidently, there's a focus on rail, and just in continuing to evolve, I guess, with the rebuilding of the travel market. Is there any way that you're expecting the product specifically will evolve, or other things that the company's going to do? Are you going to add more headcount?
Yeah. So one thing we've realized, especially during COVID, is we need to focus on niches. And what I mean by niches is areas of travel where travel is still increasing even if COVID is in this world. And every business should do the same. It's like, how do we focus on these niches that it is not impacted by COVID? And the one area that we are now really focused on is travel for the shipping and marine industry. So what I mean by that is crew changes on a ship. So let's say there's a cargo ship, and they need to change 10 crew members at Rio de Janeiro, for example. But these 10 people are coming from 10 different locations. So how do we just do one search to get 10 people to a vessel all at the same time, so this ship can be changed in terms of how it's manned, so it doesn't get any delays to get the shipping goods to another location. The other is, how do we get people to a location to get on a helicopter to get them onto an oil rig? That travel has not been affected, and if anything, it's actually increased for a number of reasons. One is they're key workers, and two, more of us are at home now, so we're buying stuff online. That means more goods are being shipped around the world. That means there's more ships, more things on the to-do list for these shipping companies, so there's more people being deployed. More of us are staying at home, so that means we're using more energy. We're using our lights more. We're using all of our home electricals more, which means we need more wind. We need more gas. We need at the moment we don't need as much oil because no cars are really around. But these little things in the energy space then all amount up where travel needs to increase again. So they're the niches that we have been focusing on, so we can become profitable even during the COVID period as a travel business.
So it sounds like a lot of the innovation at TapTrip has come through seeing the data that you've got coming in, reacting to what market conditions are, and just always just keep innovating and finding these new niches and ways of exploiting a little bit of profit out of the situation, which is fantastic.
Exactly. And I think the one thing that I could not stress enough is just coming back to the fundraising piece before, is if you're fundraising and you're struggling with venture capital, you don't really want to go do the angel investment route, but you have a relationship with a corporate, like a big corporate business in your space, try and go and get some strategic investment from them. So we took strategic investment from a travel management company, which happened to be the world's largest travel management company for the marine and energy space. If we didn't have them and we didn't have that strategic investment and that input from them and access to that customer, it would have been impossible for us to be able to do what we can do today.
Brilliant. Really good advice. And is there any one other tip that you'd want to give someone who was going to start tomorrow in current climate? And I mean, we've talked about don't be a dick. We've talked about the search for funding. Any other advice you would give?
I've got a few different things that I would do. One is try and fail as quickly as possible. And if you don't fail, great, carry on pushing, because you want to limit as much time as you can on something if it's not the right idea. So find failure. If you don't find failure, then great, you're onto something. But little failures anyway will iteratively get you to the point that you want to be at. The one other thing, once you get past that, is when you're actually looking to launch a product, is one thing I learn, and I always do now, is I like to do something called a pre-mortem. So what that basically is you are, let's say you're launching, I don't know. Did you ever use the app called Yik Yak? No,
Sadly not.
It was like an anonymous Twitter based on location. So you could I used it while I was at university, but let's say you wanted to create a Twitter that was anonymous based on your location. Before you do that, go and do something called a pre-mortem, which basically means list all of the potential reasons of why it could fail. So if you looked 5 years in advance, 2 years in advance, why did it fail? List these reasons.
Full sort of SWOT pestle analysis style.
Yeah, and then just come up with different KPIs to try and make you avoid that failure. And that's something I like to do all the time now, just so you're accountable to make sure you can make it a success.
That's really good advice. What about something for, I guess, people out there who, like you, aren't coders, but want to get into this world? What would you say has been the best approach in your experience in terms of putting teams together that can actually build a technical product?
It's going to take time. So not going to lie, one of the main reasons I went to become a product manager after I had left my previous startup was, one, because I wanted to learn more about tech and learn more how to build products. But two, was also to make friends with lots of developers and figure out who I can make a business with one day. And during that journey, I met my CTO, and we came together and started to work on something together. The one thing I've consistently seen is some people just come together and make a business because they want to make a business, whether they're a technical person or not a technical person. Try and avoid that. Don't come together just to make a business. Like, make sure you can actually be a friend with that person, because investors will see straight through it. Investors like people who have track records together. So if you look at myself and our CTO, we both used to work with each other for a couple of years, and I was the product manager of the team he was the developer lead for. That's what investors want to see, because they know we can work together. So just take your time to really find who a technical co-founder could be. Don't try and do it yourself and learn, because you're not going to be a jack of all trades and a master. You need to focus on a certain area. You need a team around you. I think most investors want to see a team of two. Me personally, I think a team of three is the best, because then you've got someone focus on development, someone focus on sales and marketing, while you as the CEO can focus on building the organization. And to be honest, at the start, if you know you're going to be a fast growth venture capital led business, your full-time job is going to be raising money for at least 6 months. So you need people around you, otherwise you're going to fail.
Brilliant. That's really, really good advice. And thank you for joining me today and sharing all of your experiences. And look forward to seeing the continued growth. And good luck again with the fundraising challenge.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks for joining. Remember to subscribe and follow us, and to share today's insights with other businesses you know who want to stay relevant in a digital-first world.